Hari Om, greetings, namaste, world greetings to all of you joining us today for this very, very special Consciousness and Healing Initiative webinar on healing. It's so great to be together today, and thank you for all of you world-renowned participants who come to hear world-renowned speakers such as the one that we have today. While you all are rolling in, please do the needful. Let us know where you're coming from. Jason has just enabled the chat. I know that our speakers love to know where all you're hailing from, and we look forward to hearing from you. And I think it is enabled, although I'm looking at the chat right now and just checking it out. Here we go. New York City, Durham, Maine, Michigan, Ohio. A lot of US people today. New York City again, Portugal, Switzerland, New Jersey, Flagstaff, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Virginia. Wonderful. Las Vegas, LA, Clemson, South Carolina, my neighbors. Thank you very much. Mill Valley, Netherlands, Miami. Wow, awesome. So good for you guys to join us today. I hope that your Friday is going well. Happy spring. Happy spring to those of you, Germany and Australia. Yeah, 4 a.m. in Australia. Cheryl, what are you thinking? That's amazing. Thank you for being with us. And no doubt you are going to be so nourished by the wisdom that is shared today. I am so, so honored and excited to share with you a beautiful, beautiful human being and teacher who I had the privilege of finally meeting in person a few years ago, actually, in San Diego, but then again at a wonderful event in the Maldives, which is close to where she resides. We have with us today Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sadhviji. She is a renunciate monk, or what we call a sannyasi, who lives in an ashram in a beautiful place on the banks of the sacred Ganga River in Rishikesh, India, nestled amid the majestic Himalayan mountains. Sadhviji has been ordained into the sacred order of sannyasis by her guru, H.H. Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswati Ji, and she has been living at Parmat Niketan Ashram there in Rishikesh for the past 25 years. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her accolades because I think sometimes we think that sannyasis or renunciates, especially in this day and age, are just sort of meditating out in a cave somewhere. So let me tell you about the Shakti of this woman and some of the things that she continues to do to support global healing. She is the Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance, which is an international interfaith organization dedicated to clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. She's president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, which is a foundation that runs free schools, vocational training programs, and empowerment programs. She is also the director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival, which many of you may have heard of. That takes place at Parmat Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh. That's been covered by Time, CNN, the New York Times, and has also been addressed by the Prime Minister and Vice President of India. She's also a recipient of President Biden's Award for a Lifetime of Service, well-deserved honor, and she serves on the United Nations Advisory Council on Religion. You may also know her as the managing editor for the monumental, and it truly was a monumental project, of the 11-volume Encyclopedia of Hinduism. Sadhviji oversees a variety of humanitarian projects, as you can see, and she also teaches meditation and lectures and writes. And here today, I'm so excited, Sadhviji. What an honor to have you. Thank you for joining us. And I'm so excited to share about your new book coming out. But if I may, and then I promise I will be quiet. I just wanted to share that when I met Sadhviji last in the Maldives, she handed me a copy of your first book, I think, From Hollywood to the Himalayas, or as we say in the South, the Himalayas. And I had such a transmission when I read that book. And I remember reading specifically around you kind of being at a very pivotal point in your life and sitting by the Ganga River. And the heart opening that you felt from meeting, of course, your guru, but also sitting there by the sacred river of the Ganga, the body of Saraswati Ma herself. How divine that we are having this conversation during Navratri, the celebration of the goddess. And I just want to share with you that that transmission was so felt by me, and I bet so many readers who read that. So absolutely thrilled that now you have a new book to share with us that has just also come out. And the name of this book, would you please tell us?
Come home to yourself.
And
The
no accident. Yes.
The subtitle says simple answers for life's essential questions. But the key is coming home to yourself and the answers that arise when we do that.
And what a timely time for this book, when we may be wondering where home even is and what is meant by home at this time, in a time where many of us feel like we're in a whirlpool of very strong energies around the world. So clearly this was in your heart to write, and you could write many books, and I'm sure you will continue to write many books in your lifetime. Why this one?
First of all, Shamini, it's just so beautiful to be here with you and your community. And I'm so grateful for this wonderful opportunity to connect in what we call satsang. And the word in Sanskrit literally means in the presence of truth, in the association of truth. And it means really that we're coming together. It's not a lecture, it's not a class. It's a coming together in that highest, deepest truth of all of us. And for me, coming together in satsang, live in person and online, is not just a really critical part of my dharma, but it's also for me one of the ways that I just find myself so filled with joy, with depth, with connection, with excitement, with love. So I'm so happy to be in this association, this precious and sacred association with you and all of your community. This book. So there's a couple of streams into why this book or how this book. Wherever I go in the world, and I travel a lot, I've been living in India, in Rishikesh now, almost 30 years. And whenever I travel, especially when I come to America, but pretty much all over the Western world, there's a suffering that I see. And people are asking the same questions around, how do I find peace? How do I find meaning in my life? How do I get unstuck? I feel so stuck. How do I get unstuck? How do I deal with the anxiety, the very real anxiety of what's happening in our world? How do I navigate my way through that? How do I address challenges that I face with grace and presence and connection so that I can actually come through them, not just drown in them? And, obviously the exact semantics of the questions vary from place to place and moment to moment, but those are really the core areas of suffering. Oh, and loneliness, like there's so much around loneliness. And I realized that the lack of answers to these questions is contributing more and more to the suffering, and that through beautiful grace, I have been blessed with being able to serve as a channel for these sorts of answers to flow for communities that come to Rishikesh every day. And as you know, Rishikesh is it's a hub. It's like a magnet, a global magnet for people who are searching and seeking, whether it's yoga, meditation, philosophy, or just peace. And those are questions that I struggled with so much in my life. It's not like I came out of the womb with any kind of answers. In my earlier book that you mentioned, Hollywood to the Himalayas, it shares all of the details of my life's journey and the struggles and the challenges and the trauma that I personally experienced, and how when I came to India, I was really gifted with solutions and answers and tools and techniques. And now in the evening every day there, right after our sacred evening prayer ceremony on the banks of the Ganga River, what in the West we say the Ganges River. We gather on the banks of the river every day and have this beautiful ceremony of prayer and meditation and song and celebration. And right after that, I give satsang. And people come and we sit together, and there's no prepared lecture or specific topic. As I said, it's not a class, but people come in with questions. And we share and we dive into those answers together. And so many people have been transformed by these answers. I was personally healed and transformed by it again almost 30 years ago. And now having this blessing and opportunity to share with others and seeing their transformation. And so many people have said to me, can you please put these into a book so that more people all over the world can actually benefit from these answers? So it's been a blessing. It's been a beautiful opportunity, a beautiful blessing to put these questions and the answers and the tools and the techniques to emerge from them into a book to share with everybody.
It's beautiful. So it's really been a natural evolution of what you have been doing, compiled now for those who don't have the opportunity to come to Rishikesh and receive the satsang in person with you, to be able to glean from the wisdom that you carry, from the lineage and through your practice. What a beautiful gift. And it sounds like very accessible then to people of different faiths, different perspectives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I always emphasize, and I'm so glad you brought this up, is that the truth that we dive into, that truth of coming home to yourself, that what I call capital T truth, it doesn't have a religion, it doesn't have a race, it doesn't have a gender, it doesn't have a language, it doesn't have a nationality, or rather, I could say, not that it doesn't have any, but it transcends all of them. It includes all of them. It's not about you need to be this religion or this race or speak this language or pray in this way. No, the the soul, consciousness, love, truth, it has no race or religion. So yeah, these teachings are definitely universal. And for me, because I come from the West, because I come from California, from LA, and quite literally Hollywood, hence the Hollywood to Himalayas title of my memoir. Because I come from that world, I understand the suffering so deeply and so intimately that one of the real blessings in my life has been to be able to be this bridge between teachings that arise from Eastern wisdom traditions, but that are just as applicable, just as accessible, just as powerful for people all over the world, that doesn't require you to change your religion, doesn't require you to believe in anything theologically. It just requires you to open your heart to the possibility and the invitation that you are more than your body, that you're more than your story, you're more than your narrative, you're more than what happened to you today or 10 years ago or 50 years ago, and that who you are is actually the answer to the ways that you're suffering.
It's so beautifully put, really beautifully put. There are universal truths, and sometimes the mind is like, okay, yeah, I know I'm not my thoughts, I know I'm not my body. We have this beautiful community here of healers, practitioners, those interested in healing, and yet it's one thing when we say it mentally, and it's another thing when we experience these things. And of course, when we hear the teachings, that just like the feeling I got when I read the first book that you had, it was not just a mental knowing of an aha click, but there was a deep knowing, there was a heart knowing that can occur. So in your own words, what is the experience of coming home to yourself
Ah,
and putting into the ineffable into the words, is always tough.
well, that's all right. That's all right because ultimately it's about a feeling and a transmission. It's not so much about the words. What I would say is imagine that you've come home. Just close your eyes for a moment. And imagine that you come home at the end of a very, very stressful day. And you come in the door, and the day has it's been physically exhausting, mentally exhausting, super stressful. And you come home and you take off your clothes and you get into a beautiful warm bathtub. And you can even picture that the bathtub has rose petals and some lavender scent, some beautiful candles around it. And you dim the lights. And you get into that warm bath. There is an almost immediate and almost universal response to that, which is, ah, right? Okay, you can open your eyes. So hopefully you were able to tap into those previous moments of your life of ah,
Well, you're
getting
fully mind
into.
reading in my view, because I literally that's exactly what I had pictured in my mind. And then you said it, which is just amazing.
And that for me is what I mean by come home to yourself. But it's that on a level of the soul, the spirit, the source, rather than just the body and the mind. Because while that warm bath is amazing for the body and the mind and the nervous system, when you get up tomorrow morning and you have to go back into that same situation and it's just as exhausting and just as stressful, the fact that you had a nice warm bath the night before, unfortunately, is not going to serve as a very long inoculation against the stress that builds up during the day. Whereas when you experience that coming home to yourself on a deep level of soul, spirit, source, it stays with you. And so, yes, of course, we have practices and you still have to meditate and you still have to do your spiritual practice. It's not a one time switch. But what it is an anchoring and a grounding in truth and in self. And it keeps you from being tossed around by the waves of life because, spirituality is not an inoculation against bad things happening. It's not an inoculation against your house burning down or an earthquake or the sickness or death of loved ones or you getting fired or your loved one cheating on you or leaving you. Like it's not an inoculation against any of those things. But what it does, when I'm anchored in myself, when I'm home in myself, I recognize that the house is not myself. The job is not myself. Even the relationship and certainly somebody else's actions are not myself. And so it gives you this ability to move through the world. It's not about leaving the world and going and living in a cave. It's about moving through the world, anchored, grounded, connected to something that is much deeper, much truer than the ups and downs of our daily lives.
An unshakable connection to the center of our being. And what happens if we were to actually all be able to move from that place, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, not only would it significantly change our lives, it would change the lives of everybody we interact with, because who we are ripples out, as our beloved, amazing, mutual, dear, dear friend Bruce Lipton always talks about. The energy that we transmit literally goes out of our bodies. And so that which I'm experiencing inside is impacting my children, my spouse, my parents, my friends, my employers, my employees, my neighbors, everybody. And so as we're looking to be agents of peace in the world, of healing, of light, I mean, as we struggle with so much that's going on, in our anger and our outrage and our misery over what's happening in the world, the best way to address that is by becoming quite literally transmitters of energy, of truth, of love, of consciousness, of oneness.
And
And
this is
that's
natural.
what we get when we come home. Yes, sweetheart.
Yeah, it's beautiful, reflecting on this from the Advaita Vedanta perspective, right? And there's this world of Maya, which some traditions, in the Hindu traditions considered to be illusory, some don't, whatever, it's all, metaphysical discussions. But there's this sense of the equal and opposite. And so we can, when we are connected to the center of our being, we can see the arising of the equal and opposite. When we witness the suffering, we see the arising of empathy and compassion in us, which is a natural response. And should we be able to be coherent in our center, then we can choose to take compassionate action, as I know you do. I know, many of us do. I know many healers, and I love that you invoked energy, because here in this community, that's what we're all about. Many of the folks that are here with us today are healers. They're interested in healing. We explore what we call the biofield in Western science as these fields of energy and information that connect us and heal us. But the fields of energy and information exist everywhere. And I just wanted to touch on a practice that, is part of the yogic practice. It's part of Patanjali's, eight limbs of yoga. It's really in some ways in the middle, as I know, Sadhviji, but some of our listeners, may want to be reminded of pratyahara, or the going inward, as part of the medicine. And so again, we have this reflex to go inward, but the inward doesn't have to be to stick our heads in the sand. This is a different kind of going inward that allows us to come from center. And I'm wondering if you'd like to speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So you raised so many really beautiful, beautiful points, and each of them could be a discussion in and of itself. But first of all, with regard to the centering within ourselves so that we can choose compassionate action, one of the things that is happening in our world today is that there's so much in the external world that we see that upsets us. And whether it's climate change, whether it's war, whether it's violence, whether it's discrimination, whether it's the decimation of our planet's water resources, whether it's the way various political leaders are operating, whatever it may be, we want to make things different. We want to be part of a solution. But what happens is when we're so filled with anger, outrage, reaction, the best that most of us can get out is, a long missive on Facebook that gets shown only to those who are already following me, or, some kind of a blog or a video on different social media platforms, again, that are being shown only to those who already follow me, who already think the same. And in my mind, I've done something because I've gotten out that anger, that outrage. I've put it on the paper. I've put it into a video. I've put it into my post. I've hit send. And it feels like I'm doing something. The problem is we're not really doing anything like that. And while I'm certainly not against connecting in community on social media, I think it's a fantastic platform. I think bringing people together is really important. We need to not think that all of the energy and time that I've expended on this missive on Facebook really is going to change something in the world in any kind of a meaningful way. In order to bring about meaningful change, what I need to do is through my spiritual practice, through yoga, through meditation, through breathing, through chanting, through prayer, through energy work, through whatever your path may be, through a walk in nature, through swimming in the ocean, through playing with my puppy dog, whatever it may be, to bring myself into a state of coming home within, finding that inner peace so that I can then actually be an instrument, an agent, a channel for positive, effective action in the world. I think about action like this in 4 components, what I call the 4 C's. So the first is connection. I have to be connected to the divine, to source, to spirit, to energy, to whatever way I think of it, to something that is greater, bigger, more than just my physical body in the midst of problems of the world. So I get anchored, I get grounded, I get connected. From that connection arises courage, because we need courage to take action, especially in the world as divided as it is, with people being as nasty as they are in a whole kind of cancel culture. It really takes courage to stand up and work for change. From that courage arises creativity, because we need creative solutions. Doing the same thing we've always done has got us into this mess. We need creative solutions, and that creativity only arises when there's courage within us. And the courage can only be there when we're connected, because otherwise, oh my God, if I fall and I fail, it's over. Everybody's gonna, laugh at me or hate me or ignore me, or I'm gonna feel humiliated and, oh my God. And so I need that anchoring. Then there's courage, then there's creativity. And then from that arises this compassion that you were talking about. And then the action that I take is rooted in that compassion. So that's the first piece that I wanted to mention, because there is a lot that we need to act on. And a lot of times people will say to me, oh, you're a spiritual leader, like you're a devotee of God, you're a believer. Why do you work so much? As you mentioned in the beginning, we run a variety of schools, free schools, women's programs, empowerment programs, upliftment programs, medical care programs, environmental programs, so many things. People say, well, if you believe in God and God is perfect, then like why do all of this? And the reason is because yes, we believe deeply in God and deeply in the perfection of the creation. But each one of us feeling sad or feeling angry or feeling outraged and then taking action from that place to bring light to the darkness. That's a critical part of the perfection of the creation. Each of us standing up and perfectly fulfilling our roles
Being the
is
center
part of the
of
perfection of the creation. It's like the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi. Oh God, make me an instrument of thy mercy, an instrument of thy grace. And that's the call. So that was something beautiful that you had mentioned about compassionate action. And now I forget the second piece. What was the second piece I was going to talk about?
Well, so many places we can go with this, but thank you for reifying the role of sacred activism and how it flows from us, how it flows, and that, no, we don't just sit here and watch the Maya dance. We can call it illusory, we can call it whatever we want, but we are still part of the creation. And I love your pathway, it's absolutely beautiful. And I love this notion, I'd never thought of it before, that but it makes perfect sense as I think about even, I'm a big believer in creativity, Sadhviji. It's a lot of what I personally like to teach with my students. I was just sharing with you, Sadhviji, by the way, if any of you did not come to Shivananda Ashram a week or so ago when I was teaching, you should go in 2 weeks because Sadhviji is going to be there. And we just taught a workshop on voicing your creativity, my husband and I. And we had people kind of come up for the first time bravely writing their poetry for the first time and sharing it for the first time. And the shift was palpable. So, this link between courage and creativity, you know, to compassion and compassionate action is so critical. And as you know, sometimes in this culture, we dispel creativity as if it's just a pathway to entertain or something like that. And yet, as we see with the embodiment in our culture of Saraswati Ma as the embodiment of wisdom, creativity and flow is a huge part of our joyful journey to sacred activism. And I love that you highlighted that. I think it's so key.
And I know there was a second piece that you had wanted me to talk about, but it has now just completely slipped my mind.
No, no, it's absolutely fine. Actually,
Okay.
I do have another place I'd like to go, but I also want to remind our audience, especially for those of you who are new to us here at the Consciousness and Healing Initiative and would like to ask Sadhviji a question. We will leave some time at the end so that you can ask your question. I will ask on your behalf. And I want to remind you that if you're joining us here on Zoom, the easiest way to do that is to click the Q&A button. If you put it in the chat, it can get lost, but if you click on the Q&A button and you type in your questions, then around 10 to 15 minutes before we end, we will dive into questions from you that Sadhviji can answer. I would love to explore with you. This is a discussion I've had personally with many different people. When we're on this pathway to coming home to ourselves, to self-realization, as we might say, there are times that the path to self-realization is deeply, deeply emotional. And sometimes when we have these experiences of really deep emotions, which sometimes can be difficult emotions, it's sort of, a question of like, oh, should I go here? Is it the right path? I'll just share personally for me, I have realized that when I have those deep emotions, it means that I am in the right place. But for me, and for others that I've talked to, sometimes this comes with almost a deep sense of what almost feels like sorrow, but the sense of coming home to yourself, that, as you said, as we slip into the bath and we let out an sometimes when we come closer to realizing ourselves, there's an almost the sense of, where have you been? And this heart yearning, this heart crying that can sometimes happen with the arising of an even more openness of the heart. And so I was wondering if you would comment on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's why we cry tears of joy, of bliss, in the evening sacred ceremony on the banks of the river that I was talking about. If you look around, so many people have tears pouring down their eyes, even people who don't understand the language, people from all over the world who don't know what the mantras mean or the chants or the prayers. Doesn't matter. There's a power in it that opens up our heart. And when our heart opens, yeah, we very, very frequently have that experience of tears. I wouldn't personally use the word sorrow so much as just a cracked openness. I definitely get the tears. I have that a lot. In fact, when I first came to India, now, yeah, almost 30 years ago, and stood on the banks of the Ganga River, I mean, I came, as you know, at 25 with a backpack on, thinking I was coming just for a 3-month adventure break from my PhD program.
Mhm.
And not as a religious person, not even as someone who identified as spiritual. I mean, I was an academic, I was a scientist, I was a Stanford grad, and now I was getting a PhD in pediatric neuropsychology. And I stood on the banks of this river, not even knowing the river was holy. Just because I was hot, I was tired, I wanted to put my feet in the river and kind of cool off. We had just arrived in Rishikesh. And in that moment, I had such an extraordinary, heart opening, spiritual transmission, transformation, awakening, whatever word you want to use. But it cracked open my heart, my mind, every single way of knowing that I had. And yeah, I burst into tears. They were tears. This was actually the first time that I used this phrase. They were tears of coming home to myself.
Mhm.
And when I was asked about it, I said, yeah, they weren't, because people say, oh, were they happy tears? And sure, they were blissful. They weren't not happy, but they weren't just the tears of happiness that you cry sometimes, when something really happy happens. It was so much deeper than that and so much fuller than that. Happiness is a state. It was definitely not contingent upon a state. And it was tears of coming home. So yeah, I think when we refind ourselves, I've used the example also over the years of imagine that your loved one went off to war and was fighting in war somewhere abroad, and you were worried every day about what was going to happen to them, what was going to happen to them. And then they come home and they walk through the front door of the house. The way that you feel about that was the way that I felt in finding myself. I wasn't aware that I had been at war. I never would have used words like that to describe it. But in retrospect, I was able to look back on the first 25 years of my life and the way that I struggled, the way that I suffered, the depression, the addiction, the eating disorders, the anxiety, all of that, the feeling of not enoughness, the need to perform and achieve to kind of prove that I'm worthy of occupying my place on planet Earth. And so that I had an identity, because otherwise, you know, you don't know who you are. And when I had that experience, it really felt like, oh my God, this, this is me.
Mhm.
And yeah, one of the ways that I think about it is that sort of reunion with the you who you don't even realize has gone off to fight in some war and now has come home.
I love it. And Maja in the chat is mentioning, yes, surrender. And I know that this is a big part of the teachings for you as well. So we can surrender to the cracking open. We can learn to embrace, or at least hold, rather, the emotion as it arises and know that it's part of the path. Um, and coming home to ourselves, surrender is a big part of it. Yeah. Anything
Surrender,
about that?
surrender's huge, but it's so important to realize that surrender is not a giving in or a giving up or a negative thing. People think of surrender as in, all right, I've tried everything. I've given it my best shot. It doesn't work. I'm failing. I'm losing. Therefore, I surrender. Surrender is not that. Surrender is strength. Surrender is wisdom. Surrender is clarity. Surrender says, I recognize none of this is in my control anyway. I mean, think about what is the opposite of surrender? Okay, if you say, okay, you've got two choices, surrender or don't surrender. Look at the don't surrender option for a moment. What does that even mean?
Mhm.
Does the world say, "Oh, you haven't surrendered? Okay, no problem. We'll do what you want." Oh, okay, you haven't surrendered. I'll act according to your wishes. Does God, does the weather, do the people around you give you control because you haven't surrendered? Of course not. We have no control over the workings of the universe. We have no control over the choices of people around us, even our loved ones. And if we're trying to exert control, that's super unhealthy, not only for us, but for them. Surrender is simply the awareness that I have no control. So surrender is truly dropping into wisdom and clarity that says, I have no control. The only thing I have control over is my own interpretation, my own reaction, my own action, my own self. And so surrender feels so good because it's like we've had this death grip on life. There's a beautiful parable of a man who was holding on to the end of a rope for dear life. And he hears this angelic voice in his mind that says, let go. And he says, I can't let go. What do you mean, let go? If I let go, I'm going to plummet to my death.
Mm.
And the angel says, well, just let go with one finger. And her voice is so soothing, so beautiful that the man says, okay, I can let go with one finger. And slowly, slowly, this beautiful, ethereal, celestial being coaxes him into letting go with every finger except one. Now he's holding on to this rope with only one finger. And she says, let go. And he says, all right, now, no way. Like now I'm really going to plummet to my death if you make me do this. And she just keeps coaxing him. And so finally, sort of unable to withstand the power of her angelic voice, he lets go, fully expecting to plummet to his death. And he doesn't go anywhere. And he looks down and he realizes that he's been standing on solid ground the entire time. And to me, that is what surrender is. It's letting go of the death grip over which we have no control anyway. And that we think we need to hold on to in order to stay afloat. Like if I don't micromanage this or micromanage that or control this, I'm going to plummet somewhere. And surrender makes us realize, A, you have no control over that. No matter how much you think you're controlling it, you're not. And B, hey, you're on solid ground. Like you don't have to control anything. Let go. The universe is holding you.
Yes. As someone notes in the chat, surrender is also about having faith, right?
Yeah, of
Having
course, absolutely.
back, yeah.
Because it's faith in the ground that is holding you. And whether we say divine, whether we say God, whether we say source, whether we say universe, it doesn't matter. But just the awareness that, hey, I'm being held. I'm being carried. There's nowhere to fall.
A perfect time maybe for us to segue into a few questions um, from our beautiful group of community here that has joined us.
Sure.
A. Lloyd asks, how do you not get overwhelmed by all the pain and suffering and cruelty in the world? How do we practically come home to ourselves with the onslaught of the pain and suffering that we witness?
Beautiful. Beautiful. So interestingly, when we open our heart to the universe, as we all should, we tend to take in the negative, but not the positive. We have what in psychology we speak about as, a negativity bias. Be open, absolutely. But be open to the positive as well. So, yes, there is death. And yes, there are new babies being born. And yes, there is cruelty. And yes, there are people taking in refugees. And yes, there is destruction. And yes, flowers are blossoming. And yes, people are losing loved ones. And yes, people are joining together in marriage today. And allowing ourselves to take in the fullness, because the negativity is a story, it's a narrative. Our world is so messed up. I'm overwhelmed by that. That's a story we tell ourselves. If you open yourself to the fullness of the world, yeah, there's darkness and there's light. There's death and there's birth. The sun sets, the sun rises. So that's the first piece. The second piece is to allow yourself, as we were speaking about before, to really be a transmitter of that which you want to see in the world. This requires two pieces. The first is your spiritual practice, your meditation, your yoga, your hugging of trees, your chanting, your prayers, that which anchors you and connects you to the perfection, to the ultimate supreme perfection of the creation of the universe. And as you move through the world as that transmitter of love and peace, what you will see is a lot of opportunities, a lot of places that need that. And each of us has different resources, different abilities, different areas of influence and impact. But just know that whatever influence, impact, ability, resource, talent you've been given it for a reason. To bring love into that, to share healing. And we can't, each of us individually, change all of that that's happening in the world. But we're not called upon to do that. What we're called upon to do is to bring about the most ripple of light, of love, of peace, of healing as we can. And it may come through you building a school. It may come through you donating money to people who do that. It may come through you connecting with the people in your community who are suffering. So yeah, there's children all over the world who are suffering, but for most of us, there's children in our own cities who are suffering. So if I can't feed the ones in parts of the world who are suffering, I'll give, financially whatever resources you can, but hey, take your Saturday, make sandwiches, make burritos, go out and feed the poor of your city. Buy blankets, go out and give blankets in the wintertime to people who are sleeping on the street. It's small, but it's big. Mm-hmm. And it takes us out of overwhelm into action.
I love this. Thank you so much. So beautifully stated. So beautifully stated. We have two questions here that I believe are somewhat related. So we'll go to the first one by Ellen. And she says, would you say that the movement of emotional energy can be likened to a releasing of the story or stories of the veil that keeps us reasserting a thought structure that creates our individual reality? So I'll repeat the question again. Would you say that the movement of emotional energy can be likened to a releasing of the stories of the veil that keep us reasserting a thought structure that creates our individual reality?
Sometimes. It depends how the emotions have been released. And it depends whether there's been other kinds of identity shifts along with that. So Emotions can be released in yoga postures. They can be released in body work. They can be released through therapy, through working in a whole variety of ways. Sometimes people think, their emotions are released because, hey, I went home and beat up my wife or kid, and hey, now I feel so much better because I was pent up with all this stress and I took it out on someone I could, and now I feel better. So obviously, a situation like that is not something that is freeing. It's something that just makes us much more stuck. In the earlier situations, absolutely, it can be connected to letting go of a story. But usually it requires a bit of an identity shift as well. Of understanding, because see, when we release emotions, that's sadness, or that's pain, or that's anger, and there's always a story along. There is a narrative with the story, and even if I've released the actual emotional energy, sometimes I still hold on to the story. So I'll give you a personal example of this. When I first met Puja Swamiji, my guru, the spiritual head of our ashram, I had asked him about fear and how to become free of fear. And he said to me, "You fear because you don't trust." And I told him my story. Here's why I don't trust. And it's a good story. It's a story that up until that moment of my 25-year-old life had always gotten me a lot of sympathy. It's a story of childhood abuse and abandonment amidst all of the privilege and opportunity and prosperity. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you going to take that to the grave?"
Mm.
And he sent me, it's a long story, but I'm going to just get through it quickly. He sent me into the river to let go of the pain of the anger, because he said, "You're waiting for somebody else to draw the line, to come in and tell you you can be done." And he said, "No one will. It's
Mm.
up to you." And
Mm.
of course, I thought, there is no way this is going to work. Like, I'm a PhD student. You don't give pain and anger to rivers. So I thought, there's no way this is going to work. But he told me to stand there and to literally offer all of the pain, all of the anger to the river. And I did. And she took it.
Mm.
And that pain and that anger. So when you talk about an emotional release, it was an extraordinarily powerful emotional release. It was a transformation on the deepest level. And yet, fast forward about 2 years from then, I had been blissfully, gracefully free of the pain, of the anger, of the fear, of the bulimia that I had been suffering from earlier, due in large part to a lot of those experiences. And really was feeling quite free and beautiful and all of that. And one day we were talking about some of the schools that we were adopting from a slum area. And I was working on raising money to do that. And I said very, very casually to Swamiji, I said something like, "Well, their situation just breaks my heart because as a survivor of childhood abuse myself, I feel that, connection." And he said to me, "When are you going to stop talking about that?"
Mm.
Now, the ego in me reacted inside like, "That's rude." Like, you've just essentially washed away my entire childhood in one swoop. And yet I stopped because over those 2 years, I had learned his wisdom, his power, his clarity. And so thankfully, I didn't react either internally or externally and kind of took a moment realizing he's not rude, he's not dismissive. If he's just said this, there's a reason for it. And what I realized was that although I had let go of the pain and anger, I was still carrying the story.
Mm,
I was still moving through the world identified as
mm-hmm.
a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. That was still my story, my identity, my narrative, even though the emotional component had been let go. So that's where I say sometimes there needs to be a what we would call a gyan yoga aspect of it, a wisdom, clarity aspect of it, other than just the emotional release.
So, so beautifully put, and thank you so much for making it so palpable with your own story, an example of how this can work. So much wisdom here in understanding that that process of letting go, not only of the traumas that we might carry in ourselves, in our field, in our bodies, however we want to describe it, in our emotions, however we want to describe it, the emotional release is part of what helps us come home to ourselves, but also the de-identification with the storyline is the other part. And sometimes this happens gradually. It's a process, and that's wonderful. We embrace that process. I mean, for those of us who may be blessed to have an instantaneous release of identification of all things, so we just come home to center and we abide in that center, that's wonderful. But it's a continuous process, this coming home to ourselves. This is what one of the many facets of wisdom that I'm taking with me today about coming home to yourself is that it can be a joyful, courageous, creative, and continuous journey. But as we continue that journey, this journey is so pivotal for us at this time so that we can really be in the fullness of ourselves and meet what appear to be challenges, major challenges at hand, so that we can now move with true sacred activism, as you know, as just for that, using that qualifier. And so so grateful to you, Sadhviji. I know that Jason put a link to your book in the chat, but Jason, if you want to throw that link in again, I know one of the questions that always comes up and has come up today, which I'm happy to answer, is do we get a recording of this? Yes, we share this recording freely with the community for the whole weekend, for the next 48 hours. It is yours to share, to review, to share with friends and colleagues, to consider. And for those of you who would like to support our beautiful NGO nonprofit initiative, Consciousness and Healing Initiative, and you would like to dive into this wisdom at any time, along with wisdom from so many leading teachers in healing, researchers as well, healing practitioners. You know, we have over 70, maybe 80 of these beautiful lectures. You can join us and support the NGO by joining us at Chi as a Chi contributor. And Jason will put that link in the chat also. It's just www.chi.is/join. And when you join us at $108 a year, a mere $9 a month, more than, not really much more than your cup of coffee, but much more nourishing. We gratefully thank you because it is your support. You know, we're called the PBS of Healing, and it is through your public support that we can continue these beautiful webinars with leading lights like Sadhviji. So thank you very much for your consideration of kind support. And Sadhviji, thank you so much for taking time out of a very busy touring and teaching schedule to share some wisdom for us today at such a pivotal time.
It was so beautiful to be with you and the whole community. And I wanted also just to mention to people that, because I know that there were more questions than we had time to get to just let everyone know that when we have satsang in Rishikesh, we take in questions from people online, and you can send them in advance. It's not that you necessarily have to join live. They come in advance by email, on the website, on social media. And we always take in questions that have come in advance. So if you didn't have a chance to ask your question today, I'm so sorry. But if you send it in by email or put it in the comments or a DM on any of social media, it will come to me and we'll take it. And also just to mention that on YouTube, uh, all of the satsangs, everything is streamed live and it's all there on YouTube. So feel free to go in and kind of search for whatever your question may be. And it's really likely that there'll be already a video on that. And that's just youtube.com Sadhviji.
Beautiful. And we do have a request to close the hour with a mantra to ignite peace in the heart. And Sadhviji, would you like to do that?
Sure, sure. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamsoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. O Divine, lead us from the darkness of ignorance and falsehood in which we suffer and bring suffering to others. Lead us from that ignorance in which we identify just as this physical body, its size, its shape, its color. Lead us from that to the light of truth, in which we realize and remember that who we are is eternal, that who we are is infinite, and that who we are is one with all. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om peace, peace, peace.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much love to you and all of you. It was such a joy to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for being with us. See you all soon.